Can Democrats flip Florida? Hey guys, I'm Samuel Arms, political strategist for Cardone Digital Ventures, and today we're going to talk about some of the impacts of not only ballot measures on state policy, but why these ballot measures are even introduced, and what are the purposes of some of these more controversial pieces of legislation like abortion and marijuana legalization. So one of the most important things to note is that Florida is a very different state, and we're going to be using Florida today as an example for these ballot measures with both abortion and marijuana to kind of look at how Democrats and Republicans use different parties in their respective states to not just shape policy, but actually shape their voters and the entire electorate. So let's look back at Florida's history. Florida used to be kind of a swing state. It voted for Obama twice, it then voted for Trump twice, but in the past it's had this very interesting purple status, even though its legislature has mostly been red, at least since the late 90s. But we've seen some of that trajectory change over the years, specifically having to do with obviously certain medical shutdowns that came about during the years of 2020 and 21. So for the first time ever, Republicans were out-registering Democrats in Florida. And we can look at some of the statistics, but the key feature of this was predominantly Democrats had more voters registered in the state than Republicans did. Obviously, because of some of Florida's policy decisions in 2020 and 2021 around certain medical issues, that attracted a certain subset of voters. And those voters who came to the state obviously voted a certain way. So this begs the question, is the purpose of policy really just for the sake of policy, or is it sometimes actually to influence your voter electorate to secure the power in your state? So some people look at, let's say, for example, abortion bans in certain states, and they go, well, why do certain states push abortion bans so severely? Well, of course, there is some ethical dilemmas that certain legislatures go over. Some of them do believe that abortion is wrong, and that's why they want to ban it. And obviously, this is a very contentious issue. But there is a second factor to some of these abortion bans. For example, Democrats are less likely to move to a state that has banned abortion after a certain period of time. And you can imagine if a state has a total abortion ban, the likelihood of Democrats fleeing that state and Republicans moving in, or Democrats just simply deciding not to move there, is quite high. But there's also a second factor. When you pass policies like, say, for example, banning abortion, it actually kills a lobbying industry for that specific subset of voter. The more abortion facilities that are in a state, the more voters and financial interest will also be in that state. A lot of abortion centers use their funding to obviously donate to the Democratic Party, which makes sense because Democrats are pro-abortion. Now, this isn't just for abortion, this is also for marijuana as well. Just recently, with marijuana being on the ballot in the state of Florida, certain marijuana industries have already pledged $15 million to put toward marketing efforts in the state to make sure that the ballot measure gets a yes vote. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because if marijuana is legalized in the state, more marijuana will be sold in the state of Florida. That seems pretty obvious, but what that means is it's going to enrich the companies that obviously run marijuana dispensaries, allowing them to further lobby the legislature in the state of Florida, securing their position. This is why more often than not, the gateway for recreational marijuana is normally medical marijuana, because medical marijuana allows more money to be donated to political campaigns from marijuana companies. So sometimes the point of legislation has nothing at all to do with the actual policy in and of itself, but one, reshaping your electorate, but then two, potentially killing or promoting the businesses which you know will help your party. It is no coincidence that in California, a lot of their policies are pro-big tech and anti-labor. A lot of their anti-labor, anti-blue collar policies obviously drive out Republican voters and promote tech voters, media voters, who more often than not are Democrats. That's why some people may think, well, why does California implement the policies that they do? Because in California and among most of our political class, it doesn't necessarily matter as far as economics goes. The state of California very clearly does not value its economic prosperity, otherwise their policies would be different. The majority of these politicians and politicos value power more than transparency or efficiency or the economic well-being of their citizenry or electorate. And because power is their number one factor, all they care about is reshaping their electorate and also allowing for the people that already are their allies to have more money. The third biggest factor that I think to take into consideration is the fact that anytime you have a ballot measure, it can obviously increase the amount of voter turnout, which once again means the policy in and of itself isn't the end. It is a means to an end, and that end is in voter turnout. One of the reasons that I can say this is because, for example, even though you're reading all these headlines about Florida potentially being in play for its Senate seat and maybe some congressional districts because of its ballot measures with abortion and marijuana, it's actually just about more voter turnout and maybe specifically in some of its swing districts. For example, there are about 30 different congressional seats that are really swing districts according to Cook's political report. 3 of those seats are in Florida. Those seats are Florida's 13th representative district, Florida's 9th representative district, and Florida's 23rd representative district. Even if Democrats have given up on, say, gaining the Florida governorship or gaining a majority in the Florida House or Senate, they can use ballot measures to hopefully promote turnout in swing congressional districts in order to get maybe Democrats elected and get control of the House. It then is no coincidence that abortion measures on the ballot are appearing in quite a few swing states this election cycle. Some of those states are Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Montana, and Maryland. So it's not just about wanting access to healthcare, access to abortion for some of these states. It's more about affecting larger outcomes, especially if you look at states like Pennsylvania and Arizona and even Nevada, which have very contentious Senate races. And just those 3 states alone could determine who our next president is. So when you're factoring in some of the media around, is Florida actually going to flip somehow to Democrats because we have abortion and marijuana on our ballot, which I don't think we will. The important factor to understand is that this is actually a multifaceted issue anytime you see ballot measures. Ballot measures are just a way to not only get voter turnout for maybe not on the larger scale elections like a Senate seat, but on the House seat, but they're also kind of avenues to reshape electorates, just like we've seen with previous policies around medical issues, abortion, and marijuana at large. When you're a state and your number one concern is keeping your political majority, and if you're a governor in that state and you want to be elected as long as possible, you don't necessarily care about the good of the electorate, you don't care about the economy. What you care about is ensuring that you have a good and intact voter base. And so whenever you see some of these ballot measures and anytime you see some of these policies being promoted, you shouldn't just think about the impact those policies will have on the state of Florida. You should, or any other state, you should think about the impact they will have on the people in that state who are voting.